Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dan, and I am joined by Charles, otherwise known as C-Rad. How are you doing today, Charles?
Hey yo, doing pretty good. Glad to be here.
Great, and I'm glad to have you. So this is going to be the first of the 3 divisional power rankings videos that we're going to be doing for the Pokemon Draft Challenger League, or the PDCL. Before we get into the video, I just wanted to briefly talk about the methodology that we use for PDCL and PDPL videos. Coach and playstyle are not taken into consideration for these videos. We basically look at it if 100 equally skilled players were given each team and then asked to play each other in this sort of massive round-robin format. These power rankings are the standings that I would expect from the end of those matches, and then a higher-ranking team doesn't necessarily mean I believe that team would be favored against a lower-rated one. For example, the number 2 team could be a 60% favorite over the number 1 team, but against the rest of the field, the number 1 team could have a 60% win rate compared to the number 2 team's 54% win rate, and because that total win rate would favor the number 1 team, it would still justify the position. I will also add for these videos, Charles and I had both created our rankings and then we averaged them together. There are 2 coaches in particular that were very highly affected by this, and I'm sure we'll pay special attention when we get to those 2 that we have fairly differing opinions on. But do you have anything to add before we dive on into this, Charles?
Yeah, I would just like to say that keep in mind, me, like you just said, me and you are the only 2 who made the rankings for this. So this is our opinion, and just because we rank you low or not where you want to be doesn't mean you're going to do bad. You know, you're still going to do great, and we hopefully will be able to give you some good, open your eyes to maybe some things that can make your team better and give you a better shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And power rankings are not predictive. Just because you're number 12 doesn't mean I expect you to finish last, and because you're number 1 doesn't mean I expect you to finish first. Because again, you might have a team at number 12 that I don't think would fit the general population very well, but could play for your strengths in particular very well. So take everything we say here with a grain of salt. It's just really a fun exercise. But with that being said, let's go into it with our number 12 ranked team. We have Ed. So Ed drafted Indeedee, Rotomwash, Tyranitar, Lycanroc Day, Slurpuff, Hatterene, Registeel, and then a bunch of tier 7s. The most notable of those probably being Kubfu, although Onix isn't bad either. Like, his tier 7s are decent, but they are what they are in tier 7s. So, looking at Ed's team, he's functionally got 7 Pokemon that you're going to expect to bring to most matches. And I think that brings his ranking down in my mind, because if you're really only prepping for 7 things instead of 10 to 12, it's really going to decrease the number of options you have to be ready for and increase your flexibility in prep. But looking at what his team does well, you see that it does have that Indeedee and Slurpuff, so he's got great speed control because that Slurpuff String Shot is going to give him some speed control. He's got Tyranitar and Lycanroc Day, which is a Sand Rush one, so he's got a Weather mode. And then he also has a Trick Room mode with Indeedee, Hatterene, and potentially Registeel. And we know that Hatterene can be oppressive with its G-Max form, just confusing everything on the opposing side. So I do think there's a lot to like here, and I think some of his transactions, which I believe are getting rid of Dusclops and Cresselia for the Hatterene and Rotom, made this team much closer to breaking into some of these higher rankings. But for me personally, I had to rate him low because I just think that while there's a lot on the team that is very powerful, it's also going to be one of the easier teams to prep for because you do only have those 7 major options that you're going to be prepping for. And yeah, he will be in Kubfu for some coaching stuff every once in a while, or Wide Guard Onix can make an appearance, and that's going to be great. But for me personally, I'm just a little worried about the depth of options. But what do you think, Charles?
Yeah, so looking at what I've written down, a lot of things you like, I like as well. The synergies of this team are mad good. Like, I mean, obviously we got the Psychic mode, the really strong Trick Room mode. Hatterene plus Registeel is a really cool core. Yeah, Sand mode, I love Lycanroc Day. I think that Mon is so fire. But my biggest issue of this team is that it's extremely weak to 5 types. And those types being ground, steel, electric, grass, and water. And I feel like all of those types are pretty common. You're going to run into those a lot with other teams, and they're going to take advantage of that weakness pretty heavily. Let's see. With that being said, I did pick a favorite. For every team, I did pick a favorite, and I picked Ronansting as my favorite. And the reason is it covers, what is it? It helps cover 4 of those weaknesses that your team has. So, I think definitely notice those, and I think some future transactions could really help round out this team, be much better and harder to prep for. But
I can agree with that. I can agree with a lot of that. Max Quake in particular looks really rough into this team because it does have a bit of a special bent outside of that obvious sand mode. But the Rotom, I think, was a great transaction. It does give him an immunity there, but it is also the only thing that is resist or immune to the Max Quake, so I do think that is going to be a potential big problem. But I can generally agree with that. But up next, in number 11, we have Ronansting. So why don't you take this one, Charles?
Sure. Okay, so Ronansting, we see Kanto Zapdos, Tapu Lele, Regigigas, Inteleon, Salazzle, Coughing Excelgor, Trevenant, Sirfetch'd, and Berserker. So this team is very fast. Has a ton of speed, a lot of power to it. Obviously, you got things like Tapu Lele and Regigigas with the Coughing doing a whole lot of damage. With that said, it being very fast, I feel like kind of hurts it a bit. And, well, I guess let's just put it like this. One thing I really notice of this team is that a lot of the faster mons are special. A lot of the slower mons are physical. So you can kind of, as someone prepping for this team, there's a clear boundary to work around, I feel like. And yeah. For my favorite Pokemon, I put in Inteleon, actually. I feel like Inteleon gives a lot of speed control, and I feel like it gives a lot of versatility to the team. But I don't really think I have much else to add beyond that.
Yeah, looking at this team, my biggest thing was that sort of physical versus special bent, because I think the main modes on this team are very heavily special focused. Assault Vest is going to be a tough item for this team to deal with a lot of the time, which is also kind of why I put the Sirfetch'd up there. I do think Sirfetch'd is going to be a much more consistent contributor than you'd assume looking on the surface with this team. But a couple other things I'm nervous about here is, although they do have some slow Pokemon, they don't have slow Pokemon, and a lot of opposing Trick Room modes are going to underspeed them. So that is going to be a potential point of weakness. I've never really seen Regigigas do well in a VGC draft, and I'm very open to being proven wrong about that, but that just seems like something that has the potential to go a little bit poorly. Another thing I'm a bit worried about here is just the speed control in general. I know that there's a lot of opportunities for max airstream, but I don't believe Zapdos gets Tailwind unless it has transfer moves. Am I right there, Charles? I think
that's correct.
So,
that's correct. Yeah.
I mean, his main form of fast speed control, even with a terrain mode like the Umbreon Excelgor, is the fastest thing in the format, but he's going to rely a lot on these max airstreams for speed control. If there's a team that can defensively line up into that, it can probably get the speed advantage on this team. So overall, there's a lot of solid pieces, a lot of things I really like on this team, but there's just a few things that make me a little nervous looking at it, and that's why we've got it in the number 11 spot. But at number 10, we have R2, who has Dragapult, Cobalion, Togekiss. I'm going to stop right there. Those first three could have been on the best team in this format. Like, that is a great fantasy core right there. I'm just going to talk about those three for a little bit first. Obviously, Dragapult, Togekiss, a great threat combo, because you could have support Dragapult and Crit Kiss, or you could have redirecting Kiss and an offensive Dragapult, and then you have the Cobalion in there, which is weak to ground and fighting, but Togekiss can redirect that away, Dragapult can beat it up. Like, there's just so much that that group can do together. But then when you look at the rest of the team, you've got Persian, Talonflame, Oranguru, Crustle, Quillfish, Maractus, Dugtrio, or Dugtro, as I've written here. The rest of the team, there are a lot of solid support pieces. You've got that Dugtrio, you've got that Persian, which is a good value. You can set Tailwind with the Talonflame. But the damage output, if someone's able to plan successfully around Dragapult, Cobalion, Togekiss, figure out what kind of offense you're going for, is going to be really, really low on this team. And that's something that makes me nervous. Like, he's going to have to play really precise every single week to get this team to maximize its output potential for those top three. Because if he doesn't have a lot else there. But that's also why I highlighted the Crustle. I do think with Shell Smash next to a Togekiss, it is going to be that sort of fourth offensive threat that this team can have. But, man, outside of those first three, he also really doesn't have a lot that can Dynamax. Not even that want to Dynamax, but that can effectively Dynamax. Like, Maractus, I've seen it Dynamax before, but it being successful is very few and far between. I'll put it like that. So, overall, solid team, really, really strong top end, but the damage output potential of the team below that top end is what makes me nervous. But what do you think, Charles?
Yeah, so for my first thing I wrote about this team was stupid fast. This team is quick. And once again, just like the last team, that's going to work to a disadvantage here. This team gets smeared by Trick Room. And, you have a Oranguru, which can reverse Trick Room, but, if that's why you're running Oranguru, that doesn't feel valuable to me. And on top of that, your best thing to function under that Trick Room is Crustle, which also doesn't feel that great. Just on paper, I don't feel like it's super great. But yeah, I think, just like you were saying with that top three core, I think there's some cool offensive modes that go with that, a decent versatility through that. But we also run into the issue here where a lot of Pokemon kind of have some role overlap. Nothing huge, but Talonflame and Persian both function with speed control a lot. It doesn't mean that they have to. They can both lower attack with either Will-O-Wisp or Charm, respectively. Quillfish, I don't really see how that fits on a team very well. Same with Maractus. And on top of this, I see no flying resist, which is pretty bad considering Airstream is very common. And yeah, so for here, I put Dragapult. I like to highlight Dragapult because I feel like that's going to be something you really bank on. I think that's going to be something that really gives you the most options out of this entire team.
Yeah, I can agree with a lot of that. If I had to recommend a transaction for this team, the thing that really stands out to me is get that Talonflame and make it something that's an offensive threat. Because you don't need the Tailwind on this team. Your Dragapult is going to be faster than everything but Regieleki in this format, and you can start just max Airstreaming with that or the Togekiss, and that's going to be your speed control most of the time. I understand why he has it, but that's just initially what I think. And I think that Persian's Icy Wind can sort of supplement the Tailwind as well. I'm a big Tailwind fan, but that's just my initial thought. But with that being said, let's take a look at our number 9 ranked team. And Charles, why don't you take HungryHippo?
HungryHippo. Okay. HungryHippo, we see JosheeWashie, Raichu, Galarian Zapdos, Cineroar, Mamoswine, Gothitelle, Dhelmise, Ditto, Lolan, Diglett, Arcaps, and Ponyta. So the first thing that I like to say about this is I feel like there's some pretty nice coverage throughout the mods, defensive-wise. This team it's slightly ground weak, but it's not terrible. I actually really like the defensive coverage that this team carries. I also think this team has a very nice Trick Room core with the Dhelmise and the JosheeWashie. I think those two are going to cover each other well, and I think Gothitelle's a pretty damn good setter. And I feel like my first drawback I see with this team is this team has a lot of physical presence, but it doesn't really match with the special presence. So you are going to be, I want to say you're going to be intimidated. You do have, Zapdos for Defiant, but yeah, people can just prep defensively against this team, and there's not a lot of special offense outside of maybe the WashieWashie that can really do a lot to deal with that. And let's see. Yeah, and I also feel like a few of these mons are slightly awkward in their roles. One example is like the Incineroar is that I just don't really understand what Incineroar is going to do on this team. And yeah, I think, yeah. And for my favorite, I put the WashieWashie just because I think that thing is really satisfying to see used, and I feel like that gives the most consistent offense on both sides for this team. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, I can agree with a lot of that. My initial thing looking at this team is that the only thing above base speed 100 is going to be Archeops, which I know has access to Tailwind, but your fast mode is going to be relying a lot on Archeops being alive and setting Tailwind. And I'm not sure how much of a position you want to be in there. Like, yes, this team has bulk to potentially play a slow, bulky game, and it can obviously set Trick Room and do very well in Trick Room, but there are going to be some games where you're forced to try and play fast, and I'm not sure if Archeops is going to be the Pokemon to do it, especially since Archeops is only base speed 110. If it was 130, we could be talking something entirely differently here, but that's in my mind, the biggest drawback of the team. I know the Zapdos can max and start airstreaming, but it's never going to be the first thing, or very rarely is it going to be the first thing to go with a max airstream just plain there. And Galarian Zapdos is a bit more frail, just in terms of types it's weak to, than the Cantonian Zapdos, so it does make me a little worried there as well. The Pokemon I picked here is Incineroar, lovingly referred to in this call as Vincent. So I think Incineroar is the highest skill cap Pokemon in VGC draft. I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but I can't think of anything that's higher than it. Like, it has so many different things you can do with it flexibly. Like, you can play that classical, like, bulky, pivot, cripple your opponent. It can be a max threat. There's just so much you can do with it, but it's never going to be like the best Pokemon in any one of those roles, so you need to be playing really, really well with it and maximizing its versatility. And I think if Hippo does that, he's going to be a really strong contender to get into Code Red, but if he just sort of sends out the Incineroar, gets Intimidate off, Fake Out, tries to Parting Shot like every time and gets a little predictable, I think this team gets a lot easier to deal with. So yeah, that's sort of where I am on HungryHippo's team, but I do think it is very solid overall. We're getting to the point where I think all of these teams are, at this point, very, very solid and a bit nitpicky, and I think this is a deep division because of that. Like, there is no team that's like, oh, I think this is just overwhelmingly the best. But there are, like I said, 9, maybe 10 teams, depending on how you feel about the last one, where you could look and say, like, okay, this team is really solid, and I could see an argument for it being a top 4 team. But yeah, up next, we've got number 8, Beneproteine. I know that he's Canadian and has accents on those, and I probably just butchered the pronunciation, but I'm going to be doing my best there, so I'll probably just call him Bene for the rest of the video. But looking at his team, we've got the Metagross, Entei, Blastoise, Sableye, Articuno G, Piloswine, Bolton, Serena, Herdier, and Pinsir. So the first thing I want to point out here, great Metagross team. Metagross Entei, you've got Bulldoze Weakness Policy procs. Sableye, you've got Shadow Sneak Weakness Policy procs, and Quash for speed control. This team is also, it has a lot of physical attackers, but it's like impossible to intimidate because you've got the Entei and the Metagross as the 2 main physical attackers. You've got Blastoise, which has the potential to set up. No redirection for it, so it's probably going to be support Stoise more often than not, but if it does get set up, it's going to be very strong. And then Articuno G, I'm a big believer in. It's got Tailwind and Trick Room, and it's a good max option. But that's also one of the things that I'm most nervous about for this team is Metagross and Articuno G are going to share a lot of the same weaknesses in Dark and Ghost, and your resists to those 2 types aren't fantastic. I'll put it like that. I'm not sure if they exist really, but beyond like the Herdier for Ghost, and I think Pinsir resists Dark, right?
No, it does not.
No. Okay, no. So there's no Dark resist on the team, and Herdier is your Ghost immunity. So that makes me a little nervous defensively when your best max options share weaknesses that are going to be pretty easy to exploit. But otherwise, I think this team has a lot of offensive pressure. It's really built to be a Metagross team, and that's obvious. But I really like Articuno G. I'm just not sure if this is the team for it. But why don't you tell me a little bit about this team, Charles?
All right. So overall, I do like the cores of this team. I do like a lot of the synergies it has. I'm a bit more of a believer in Articuno G, but I definitely understand where you're coming from because a lot of the Intimidate pressure is getting shook off by Inner Focus and Clear Body. But Articuno G does give a nice Tailwind setter. I believe it gets Tailwind.
Yep.
But like, yeah, you also got things like Bolton for speed control, which granted isn't probably not as consistent, but yeah. Let's see. One thing, I think my favorite thing about this team ever is actually the Sableye. And just because I feel like without, like, if this was any other prankster, like, Mon, I feel like this team probably it's a lot worse. I just think Sableye, it fits this team so well. It glues this team together, like you were saying before, with, like, Quash and Shadow Sneak procs. Like, this Mon's that Mon's just so good on the team, which leads me to believe it might be a little bit like heavily relied on. Not that that's an issue, but yeah. Let's see. Another thing I also noticed that there's not really any great Trick Room setting here. I mean, the speed tiers overall are pretty oh my god, what am I thinking? Like, pretty spread out. But I do wish there was a bit to help it with the Trick Room matchup. But other than that, yeah, I do think it's really solid. I think it's going to get some good use, and I'm excited to see how this team does.
Yeah, we know Ben is a really good player, so I imagine he's going to do well with it. But there are just a few issues that I have with the team that were discussed that prevent me from ranking it any higher. But before we go into the next team, which I'm going to let you cover, just know this is going to be one of the two teams that we really highly disagreed on. One of us had it as a top 3 team, and I think the other one had it as a bottom 4 team. So there's a lot of split opinions on it. So Charles, I'll let you go first with JosheeWashie's team.
Alrighty. Alright, so JosheeWashie's team. We see Cinderace, Whimsicott, Bisharp, Seismitoad, Riolu, Musharna, Dragalge, Galvantula, Spirit Tome, and Terrakion. So my favorite thing about this team is the offense to it. I'm a big offense guy, and I think there's just a whole lot of options offensively here. Like, I mean, Whimsicott is like the premier like offensive support mon. You know, you got like beat up for Terrakion. Cinderace is going to go crazy. You can set Sun for it. And then Riolu is also there, just making that even harder to deal with. But, yeah, I don't know. I do think that this team does have a decent ground weakness, which isn't great, but it does exist. Oh, and I also believe it's going to struggle a bit on the special side. This team is pretty physical, and a lot of the special attackers, you know, like the premier one here is like Dragalge. Like, Max Quakes are just going to come out, and then the special side kind of just gets neutered. But like I said, this team is also primarily physical, so that's not the biggest thing in the world. But yeah, and another kind of like picky thing here is that I don't really see a ton of role versatility. Like, you see the Pokemon that comes out, and you kind of have an idea of what it's going to do. I mean, things like Whimsicott are going to be an exception, but like everything else, I feel like is pretty linear, which I feel like can hurt a little bit. But I mean, these things are strong for a reason. Like, I mean, yeah, I'm excited to see how that works. And I put Whimsicott as my favorite one just for that reason, just because I feel like it's the most versatile and it gives the team a lot of options. But that's all I got. What do you got?
Yeah, so it's pretty well documented at this point that while I like Cinderace, I'm not as high on it as a lot of other people, but this is a fantastic Cinderace team. You put it next to Whimsicott, you have access to Tailwind and its speed, which was always really good, but never quite there in terms of the fastest things in the format. It does become the fastest thing in the format. If you're airstreaming next to a Bisharp, you can't really be intimidated, and my biggest thing about Cinderace is just how intimidate weak it is. But if you're next to a Bisharp, that's not going to be a thing, and if you're airstreaming, you no longer are ground weak, and then Bisharp has access to things like Assurance, which can really do a lot of damage after a max airstream. There's an option for a raid mode that can include a special Seismitoad, and then I think this team's obviously really good when it's going fast. Things like Galvantula, Terrakion, we didn't even talk about the beat up Terrakion sets. Obvious power with a lot of what this team is doing offensively. You are right; it is very physical in nature, but I think where this team actually shines is its ability to pivot to a Trick Room mode if needed, because Musharna Dragalge is a really strong Trick Room mode, and that's why I picked Dragalge here. It keeps your opponent honest. They can't just punk you out with their own Trick Room, and if they try to go over the top of your speed, say they have something like Tornadus, and then they're going to start airstreaming, and they're going to try and Electro Web and Icy Wind, you can just go under them with the Dragalge, and that thing has such high damage output. So I'm a pretty big fan of this team overall, and I think that the Dragalge, Musharna, Spiritomb is actually going to be coming pretty frequently to just stunt a lot of opposing Trick Room modes, because I think this team's fast offense is enough to speak for itself in this format. But moving on, teams 3 through 6, actually, when we averaged our rankings, ended up in a 4-way tie. So we went through a few different processes for breakers, but Team 6 is one that we also had some disagreement on. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. It's Etrainsfb or Etrainsfb. I'm not sure what he/she/they prefer. So just let me know in the comments so I make sure that I get it right in future videos. I probably should have asked before recording, but it just now struck my mind that I don't know if that's Trainsfb or Trainsfb. But we've got Cole, Azumarill, Weavile, Butterfree, Gothorita, Salaman, Sicario, Decidueye, Runerigus, Jolteon, Metapod. So obviously star of this team is Metapod. It is an absolute unit in this format. I'm kidding, of course. But this is a Cole team that has a lot of other options, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the Cole option here. I am not a huge fan of Cole in draft, generally, because I think it's easy to prep against, and the more skilled your opponents are, the easier it's going to be to prep against. It's like Cinderace in that regards, but Cole, I think, has that sort of syndrome even worse than Cinderace does. So I'm not a huge fan there. But I do think that Azumarill, Butterfree, Salamence, Decidueye, Jolteon, that's pretty decent offenses there. So overall, I think this team has a lot of decent offensive sets. It can try to do some Trick Room with Iron Ball, Azumarill, and Runerigus, for example. Lucario I'm not 100% sold on in draft. I've tried it. It generally underwhelms me in the formats, but I do see that it is a potential beat-up option as well. So there's a lot of different leads that this team can do, but I think that it has just a few too many wasted resources on a Cole mode that I'm not a huge believer in. But Charles, I know you said this is your favorite Cole team you've ever seen, so why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
I absolutely love this team. This team is so Cole. That was a bad joke. Just we can edit that out. It's fine.
No,
but
I'm not
anyway,
going to.
Okay, damn. I think this team, it surrounds around the Colossal. And if you can stop the Colossal, then you might be in a good spot. But this team enables Colossal so well, in my opinion. And I love it. It's so cool. Yeah, I think this thing has some awesome speed options. I think this team has a lot of flexibility within different modes. Because, I see a beat up mode. There's a bunch of ways to enable Colossal. Butterfree can redirect ground attacks away from Colossal. All this stuff. It just strikes me as being really strong. And the Weavile specifically, I just love it because it enables all of the modes like that this team wants to do. On top of that, Weavile hits like a truck, and yeah, my one big gripe with this team is that it's got some type weaknesses. It's pretty ghost weak, but like you do have Weavile being a fast dark type to help you deal with the ghost types. But yeah, like the only thing I can say is I really like the team, and I really hope this does well. I think in a 6-week format, this team has a potential to do a lot of damage.
Yeah, I can potentially agree there. But Charles, why don't you take our next team that was in this tie with Trunks?
Bronx. All right. So, okay. Oh yes. Okay, I remember this. So we got Tornadus Eye, Dracovish, Scrafty, Heatran, Togepi, Reuniclus, Tapu Bulu, Galarian Darumaka, Haunter, Togedemaru, and Carcosta. So I really like this team a lot as well. So right out of the gate, we see some good speed tiers and we see good speed control. I mean, anything with Tornadus is just gonna have great speed. That thing is just so good at enabling everything it has. It's got strong offensive synergies. I'll say one synergy I really like on this, and I actually wanted to run it in PDPL, is the Heatran Tapu Bulu. I think that combo together is awesome, and I'm really glad to see that get some use. We have some good follow me options with the Togepi. We got some setup, which is really nice, and overall just some strong cores. And yeah, I think what am I trying to say here? Heatran is just one of those Pokemon that wants to be like enabled by its team, and I feel like this team does a great job of that, and I think it makes it into a huge threat to where you can maybe make that like your premier like sweeping mon. Like obviously the Dracovish is there, but Dracovish in this team strikes me more as like something to like pick off the weaknesses. So I do really like the synergies in that regard. I will say this team is rather physical. I mean, Heatran will go over the top with its special damage, but it in ways is pretty Intimidate weak. It will... Oh, I can't even read my own handwriting. Oh, it struggles somewhat against Water and Ghost. Just looking over, I don't even think I see a Ghost immunity or resist anywhere, so definitely look out for that. Oh, there's Scrafty. But yeah, I think those are two pretty strong, hard-hitting types, so definitely look out for that. And I feel like this team is going to rely pretty heavily on the Tornadus. Which, I mean, if you're going to rely on anything, Tornadus is probably the best Pokemon to rely on. But it is pretty... It's going to be easy to work around in that regard. But what do you got for this?
Yeah, so this team takes Matt's Rillaboom Heatran Togetic team, or core from the PDPL, and changes it slightly to give it Togepi and Tapu Bulu, which I think are both going to be obviously slight downgrades, but it allows him more points for the rest of the team, which I think is an interesting choice. The Tornadus is going to allow this team to go first most of the time, and Heatran does hit like a truck, but it also is a quad weakness that you have to consistently play around, as is the Tapu Bulu, a quad weakness that you have to consistently play around, and the Scrafty as well. So there are some things on this team that make me nervous. I do think Skill Swap Haunter with Choice Scarf next to Heatran, that's going to happen, and it's going to be cool. Like, ground immune Heatran, it's going to take some souls at some point or another. But overall, I do think it is very, very solid. It's got good damage output. It's got good typing. It's got a decent way to respond to Trick Room mode. I'm not exactly sure what the Togedemaru is doing on this team, because that's just another quad ground weakness, so that might be something that I look at switching out, maybe to further flesh out the Trick Room mode. But overall, I think this team does a lot of things well. I don't think it does anything exceptionally, but it does a lot of things well, and it's going to allow Trunks some flexibility when he's playing with it. But in the number 4 spot, we've got Goomer22, with his Regidrago, Venusaur, Ninjask, Heliolisk, Ninetales, Jellicent, Umbreon, Darmg, Sandaconda, Sojourner, and Bronzor. So let's start with the obvious. It's Sun Team. It's designed to be a Sun Team, and it's a fast Sun Team because it's got the Venusaur and the Ninjask. But if your opponent has Rain Dance, what are you going to be doing with this team? you're going to have to rely a lot on the Regidrago, the Umbreon, and then the Darmg for damage. I did leave it as this form of Darmg because I still have nightmares about it, even though the other form is much more likely to come on a consistent basis. Overall, obvious high damage output, obvious high synergy team with the Heliolisk, Ninetales, and Venusaur. I think the Ninjask speed swapping the Regidrago is going to be pretty cool. Speed swapping maybe Banded Darmg, that's going to be pretty cool. Trick Room mode leaves me a little nervous for this team. I do think it's pretty Trick Room soft, but I think this is a team that's just going to try to beat you with offense, but if you can go over the top of it, it's going to have a hard time coming back because its defensive synergy isn't as good as a lot of other teams, because while Umbreon is a great defensive Pokemon, it can't really do it all by itself. Jellicent can't really survive both physical and special attacks as well as you want it to. Like, you look at it, you think it can survive anything, but you really have to pick if you want to survive the physical or special hits. And then Stonjourner will eat every physical hit, but it also has 25 base special defense, or maybe 15. It's a small number. So it's got some obvious defensive liabilities, but a lot of obvious offensive power too. What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, I think offensively this team is absolutely monstrous. And I'm also looking up the, I'm fact-checking you a bit because you said the Ninjask gets speed swap. I don't think it actually does get speed swap.
Oh, it doesn't get speed swap? Okay, never mind.
But, I mean, not to discount the fact that it can baton pass its speed boost.
Right.
But yeah, there's so much power on this team, and I think it's great. The coverages and defensives, like, I definitely agree. Defensively, it can be a little rough, but I think having the Umbreon and the Jellicent really helped to round that out, and I think those two are going to be, like, very strong defensive pieces for the team. Yeah. I feel like the team kind of wants some tailwind here, just specifically for the Regidrago, but I'm interested to see how it functions without it. And I gotta say, I love the Darmanitan on this team. I think on a Sun team, that thing is gonna be it's gonna be fire. Like, literally, it's gonna be fire, and I'm so excited to see that. And like on paper, it's such a weird Sun team, but like, yeah, not to bring the coach into the team power ranking here, but like, I'm so excited to see what Goomer does with it, because I know Goomer's gonna have some crazy stuff going with it.
Yeah, I bet it'll be fun, and it's going to be must-watch videos every week for the 6 weeks that he's playing with this team. But moving on to the last team in our four-way tie, why don't you talk me through Matt's team? Because I have a feeling we both like his team more than he does.
Oh, I have some thoughts about this team. No. But we got Torkoal, Mimikyu, Latios, Aerodactyl, Nihilego, Zoroark, Persian A, Magneton, Lilligant, Buzzwole, and Igglybuff, which is based. So I feel like this is a very experimental team for Matt. Looking at a lot of Matt's prior teams, like, I feel like this is just not something that we would usually see from him. And I think he even said he was going more experimental. But yeah, I think speed-wise, this team is absolutely killing it. I think Mimikyu's the best Trick Room starter in the game. He's got, 20 base speed Colossal Torkoal, which is going to be really cool with Eruption, and I'm really excited to see that work. And yeah, a really nice bulky offense, and I think Zoroark could have some fun strategies here as well. Let's see, but there's one really bad thing about this team, and it's that he picks Lilligant and not Leafeon. That's all I got.
I mean, that's an opinion you can have, I guess, Charles. But let's also remember that after you, next to Eruption Torkoal is a thing.
You know what? It's still not Leafeon.
So I think that was the correct choice on his part. But yeah, so this team can obviously do fast stuff like after you Eruption Torkoal. It can obviously do slow stuff like Trick Room. Latios is a great glue piece that can do a lot. It can set Tailwind, or it can be a really threatening max option. Aerodactyl's a good Trick Room or Tailwind setter. Nihilego can set Trick Room. It can also just be an offensive piece that's especially bulky. I really like it, especially for the value proposition that it has in the league. Persian A is a great support piece, and then Buzzwole exists. Magneton, also a lot of potential there. Base 70 speed, you can scarf it. It'll outspeed some base 130s if you want it to. And it's got really good special attack. And if you just put a Violite on it, it's tanking hits for days. So overall, I think the team is really... Again, it's one of those really solid teams. It has a lot of damage output, and it has a lot of different speed options, and I like the variety of speed options with the team. So yeah, I think overall, I'm going to be more of a fan of this team than Matt is, because I know he's not a huge fan of it, but man, Latios and Mimikyu and Heligo, that's going to be pretty hard to break through on the special side, and then just the damage output's going to be so good.
It's a really cool team. I like it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be fun to watch too. But up next, in the 2 spot, and then these top 2 teams, they were top 3 on both of our rankings, so they were a pretty clear top 2 overall. But number 2, we've got Toxic with Spectrier, Clefairy, Torrentee, Blaziken, Swampert, Impidimp, Obstagoon, Gourgeist, Vikavolt, Glalie, and Klinklang. Okay, Clefairy, Spectrier. Awesome. Max Spectrier, I know some people think Gengar is better. Those people are what we can refer to as wrong in this circumstance.
Good take.
Max Spectrier is an absolute monster, even if it's just launching, Max Strikes off of Hyper Beams or Max Ghosts. Put it next to a Tornadus or a Blaziken, and the defense drops that you're sending out, it's going to be awesome. The speed drops you're sending out, you're going to have speed for Tornadus or Swampert if you want it. Like, Max Spectrier, awesome in this format. But what else does the team have access to? Blaziken and Swampert. Blaziken's also a great max option. You protect, you get your speed boost, max it, and then it has 2 stab max moves that boost itself, because you either set Sun if you're using 1 stab, and then your next fire move is going to be stronger, or you're using a fighting stab, and you are giving yourself plus attack. And Blaziken has decent coverage as well. Swampert, I think, works well with him defensively and hits hard as well. Obstagoon is just a really cool Pokemon, and Gourgeist is incredibly physically bulky, and it's going to be his Trick Room setter. Gourgeist Vikavolt, I think, is enough Trick Room threat to keep opponents honest. And overall, I just think this team is, spectacular. There's just so much damage output, so many different ways that you can do speed control, because you can set Trick Room, you can set Tailwind, and you can just start Airstreaming or max striking. There's just so many ways where you can get the speed advantage. Even just Protect on Blaziken and you can start getting the speed advantage. So I think this team is just great overall. If I had to look for some weaknesses, you can go underneath that Trick Room mode, because those are both base 40 plus speed Pokemon. So if you've got base 30s, you can get under that Trick Room mode, and then it can get a bit complicated for him, because while they're both decent defensively, Gourgeist, especially physically, if you've got a slow fire type, this team's going to be kind of soft to that under Trick Room. But that's a bit nitpicky on my end. What do you think, Charles?
If I could describe this team in one word, it's versatile. This team is so versatile. It has so many things it can do, and I absolutely love that about it. This team's going to be a lot of fun to prep with. I mean, we see a lot of things that can work really well in Dynamax, and things that work really well outside of Dynamax. And I mean that single Pokemon working in both roles. So this team's going to be extremely difficult to prep for in that regard. It also has some nice weakness policy options. I mean, it's got Clefairy to help follow me set up with the Friend Guard. This team is just, it's very good. And I would say, actually no, never mind. But yeah, and you mentioned a fire weakness. I did notice it's pretty weak to fire. His best way to stop that though is Swampert, and this is a team that Swampert loves being on. Mm-hmm. So that makes that pretty nitpicky, like you said. But yeah, I think you really just said a lot of my thoughts with this. I think this is a really solid, versatile team. I think Toxic is going to have a lot of fun prepping with this team. It's just unfortunate we only get to see it for 6 weeks.
Yeah, I agree. This is going to be pretty fun. But let's look at the number 1 ranked team, and I'll let you take this one, Charles.
All right.
Default Celesteela team number 7. Go.
All right. Let's go. So this is Toby's team, Tobster. We got Celesteal, Lipard, Pelipper, Garchomp, Pink Urchin, Kabutops, Alcremie, Cofagrigus, Lurantis, Abra, and Heracross. I'll be honest, this team is just fantastic. I mean, just gotta start with that. This is like a standard Celesteela team to me, but with a kick. And the kick is coming from a lot of that's coming from things like the Pincurchin and the Kabutops, which are things that kind of deter people away when building Steela teams. But like Pincurchin in this team is so awesome because it can run that Lightning Rod next to the Celesteela, and it can also run a Electric Terrain, which will hurt the Celesteela in some regards, but then that gives a lot of advantage to your Lipard for your Lipard to do a lot of damage and support better. And on top of that, we got the Kabutops, which is just absolutely insane for dealing with the fire types. And I mean, I know you have a lot of experience with Kabutops, and I'm sure you can say more about it. But I think it's great. It seems great synergies across the board. Very strong cores. Yeah, I mean, Garchomp's also just really, really, really cool on this team. And really the only like cons I could think of are super picky, and that's that you're slightly ghost weak, but you do have some good options to deal with those ghost weaknesses, being like super fast Kabutops to just hit things hard. And yeah, I think that you might have some trouble with Intimidate, specifically with the Kabutops and the Garchomp, but like I said, it's a pretty damn picky thing. This team is overall just really good, like, and well deserves number 1 ranking. What do you got?
Yeah, it's a very solid team. We all know how the Rain, Lightning Rod, Celesteela things work, but I think this team does something better than most other of those teams, which is why I was sort of tongue-in-cheek when I said default Celesteela team number 7. A lot of those teams, like if you look at Alflamingo's team in the PDPL this season, what they lack is initial offensive punch because everything needs setup. Here, that's not a problem. Garchomp, that's almost initial punch by itself. Kabutops, it's going to be a sweeper. It doesn't need to max, and Liquidation and Rock Slide both hit really hard. And this team also has the ability to play slow if it wants with a Trick Room mode with that Cofagrigus and Pincurchin, even a slow Celesteela. Lipard's a great supporting option. So I just think overall this team takes that sort of default Celesteela framework that has proven to have a lot of success across a variety of leagues and improves upon it by giving it that initial offensive punch that so many of those teams really lack. So that's why I think that there is an argument for this team at number 1 overall, and I think it is obviously a solid team. But with that being said, our final power rankings are the Tobster, Toxic, Matt, Goomer, Trunks, Etrainsfb, JosheeWashie, Beneproteine, HungryHippo, R2, Ronansting, and Ed. Like we said, these are not predictive rankings. This is just really an exercise for fun and because the public demands it. But do you have any final thoughts, Toxic, on these power rankings?
Ouch, you just called me Toxic.
Charles, sorry, I was just looking at Toxic's name on my screen.
Good.
I apologize, Toxic.
Man, okay. Yeah, final thoughts. I mean, I guess my final thoughts is that I would like to know some of your thoughts, you know? I mean, obviously, me and Dan are just 2 people. I feel like a lot of the things I said specifically were pretty scatterbrained and probably didn't make a lot of sense. So I'd love to, like, maybe have a conversation if you don't agree with something, and maybe you can change my mind, or I can change your mind, or whatever, you know? Overall, I just want to know your thoughts, because this is, like I said, it's just a fun thing, and I think healthy discussion is great. I think it's nice. But that's all I got.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to get a conversation going in the comment section below, but thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy this type of content, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll be coming out with 2 more sets of power rankings in the near future. So I will see you guys later. Bye.